I have spent an unreasonable amount of time trying to figure out what engine I'd like to tear down next. Because today's teardown is not just an ordinary teardown. Somehow I've hit the 100K subs mark, not quite sure how. So I wanted to take down something special, at least special to me. So today we're going to take apart a BMW E36 M3 6-cylinder. And this is an engine that came out of one of my parts cars. It was a car I bought from the auction, spent way too much money on in the hopes that I could save it. And it was just too rusty, it was too rough. So I decided to part the car out. The car just was dismantled last week. So we're going to take the engine apart and figure out what went wrong. The car this engine came from had been sitting for quite some time. When it came in, it had no passenger seat and no water pump. It's kind of odd. And it only had 170,000 miles on it. It's pretty young. This thing died way too young. It's gone too soon. But thankfully for me, lots of money in parts on this engine. In fact, I can sell just about everything off of this engine except the intake manifold. Everybody swaps those out for the M50 or S50 intake, which is the OBD1 version of this engine being OBD2. Now this engine, we tried hard to get it running. Part of the reason I spent the money I did on this car is the fact it had some Dynon parts. I could tell in the pictures it had a Dynon exhaust, it had a Dynon tune, and it had a Dynon carbon fiber intake, which is no longer made, I don't think. So those parts sell for quite a lot of money, and we noticed one other thing when we got this engine out. This car also had a Dynon throttle body. First, let's see what the plugs look like. Oh, it's going to be like that. Okay, water, more water. Cool. Well, you don't need to lubricate your spark plugs. Sometimes this happens when cars sit for a while. Must have been a bad seal somewhere. I'm getting a little better at this. Normally I just take the air nozzle and go to town, but I have this thing about getting better. And we're going to get better by pouring this into this tub, which is still going to make a mess, I'm sure. It's not too bad. Now let's get the plugs out. The plugs are all the same brand. They're NGKs, which is a good thing to see. And they all look about the same. I don't see one that looks worse or better than the others. They're actually not in that bad a shape. They're not very worn. They must have been replaced somewhat recently. Next, I think we're going to start the process of getting the engine harness and the intake manifold off. I'll show you guys the real reason I like BMWs. No fight. These dipsticks don't hate me. Okay, I think we can start unbolting the intake manifold now. All right, let's see what I missed here. Oh, I missed something. Oh, I missed a bolt over here. Okay, let's see if we missed anything. I'm sure we have more to disconnect. One vacuum line. Pesky, pesky vacuum line. And something else. Another vacuum line. I knew it felt like I was doing this too soon. Okay. And we're off. Some of you might notice I'm using a different chuck driver. I left mine at home because I just forgot. We didn't need that. And the harness is off. Unfortunately, when we first powered this car on, we let the smoke out of the harness. Now, unlike other electronics, you can put the smoke back into a harness. It just takes a lot of work. And in this case, even though this harness would be worth $600, maybe $700 if it was unmolested, this harness is not worth fixing. It's hard to sell a harness that's had repair. Well, the intake ports look pretty good. We just got to leaf this one out of here. Just some debris when I pulled the intake. I don't see any damage per se. Another leaf, but I don't see anything bent. So far, so good. The next thing I'm going to do is pull the oil filter housing off. Now these engines, pretty much all of the earlier inline six engines have big problems with the oil filter housing gasket. It's a piece of rubber, it gets dry and turns to plastic. But thankfully, when BMW went to the N52, N54, and N55, they completely resolved all their oil filter housing gasket issues. First, I'm going to take this line off the housing. No, come back. Go back to your home. Now, this impact may not have enough oomph to get this off. We'll find out. I did put a pan underneath this because I expect a little bit of leakage. And there wasn't any. The gasket did stay on the block. Let's see how soft this is. It's pretty good still. That's actually much better than they normally are. Oh, no, it broke. This is a major source of oil leaks on BMWs. Next, I'm going to pull the secondary air injection valve off and then the exhaust manifolds. Now, these go bad quite often, and it's the usual culprit when a secondary air pump goes bad. When these go bad, they let moisture and condensation from the exhaust backwards into the pump, collects water, and ruins the motor. Super common. Lots of people just replace the pump because that goes bad, and it goes bad again because they didn't replace the valve. These vacuum lines also deteriorate. Next, let's start pulling the valve cover off, shall we? Those will get you when they're tight and too tight. Well, that smells so bad, I can't even describe it. It smells like nail polish remover, but concentrated, which I think that's how it is anyway. This looks pretty good in here. I don't see any signs of water in the oil, like there's no milkshake. That's a good sign. Let's pull this cover off. Some signs of moisture in here, which is not a good sign. But nothing mixed. Just a little condensation at the top. All right. So far, the cams look really good. We'll check the journals here in a second. The cams are definitely one of the more valuable parts out of this engine because they're an upgrade for the other engines based on this family. Before we get too much further, I'm going to get this AC compressor bracket out of the way, the tensioner out of the way, and start taking the crank pulley off. Before we take this pulley all the way off, I'm going to turn the engine over to top dead center. Which is right about there. Now to get these off, they either come right off or they fight. There's the inside pulley. I think this will come off. Next, we're going to get this very crusty thermostat housing out of the way. How does this look? Ew. Well, they were using BMW blue. Now, this thing sat for a while without the water pump on it, which is likely why it looks the way it does. Ugh. I'm also going to get this hard vacuum line out of the way. Next, I'm going to remove these two plugs so I have access to this gear. That was unplanned. All right, now I'm going to crack these loose. Hopefully the engine doesn't rotate. It may, though. Next, I'm going to put a pin in this chain tensioner to kind of keep that in place. It'll give me a little more movement here. So now I've got some slack, and I can possibly rotate this cam. It'll help me get the Vanos off a little easier. I'm actually going to try to roll this cam just a little. It'll make this come off. Now I'm going to use this cam. I'm just going to bump it a little bit. It should pop the Vanos off. Just like so. The next thing we're going to do is unbolt the cam gears so then we can pull the cams. Well, that didn't go as planned. Try to keep this all in order. It's not super important, but it's just a habit. The next thing I'm going to do is pull the chain tensioner out. Get some slack on that chain. Now we're going to pull this tensioner. First, let's get this cam gear off. I think we can. Let go. Perfect. Next, start cracking these cam caps loose. So now these come out with the tray. It's all one piece here. Well, it's not all one piece. Then all the lifters fall out. It's no big deal. Except for when they fall out like that. What a jerk. Now the intake cam. Same thing as the exhaust. This usually slides out. Don't mind the lifters. I don't really think this qualifies as a good bath towel anymore, but it works for this. So here's the moment of truth. Will these cams be okay? There's a few grooves in it, but it's not terrible. Same with that one. I've definitely seen worse. I think these are totally serviceable. Let me show you. The big area for concern are these journals. You can see there's some grooves here. I can kind of feel that with my fingernail. It's not great. It's not perfect, but it's not as bad as I've seen. Some more there. And on the other cam, it's not quite as bad. There's still a few grooves. It's not ideal, but it's not like these are trash. These are still worth a good amount of money, even with the damage. The trays also look pretty good. These look better than the cams do. Little groove there. I've seen much worse. And the inside of the head looks pretty good. Usually if it's got a bent valve, you'll be able to tell from the top. But this looks okay so far. The next thing we're going to do is remove this guide and these front head bolts, and then we'll get the rest of these head bolts out and yank the head off this engine. Ooh, that doesn't feel good. Nope, I don't like that. Oh my God. My life just flashed before my eyes. Thought for sure that was going to break. That would have been the end of my night. Now, let's crack the head bolts loose. These are not tight when you have a big breaker bar. Well, that one was tight. See if I can fish these out so they don't get in the way. Perfect. Oh, you know what? Probably need something to catch any fluid that might come out. See, I'm getting better. It is very on there. Let's give it a little help. Okay. Well, so far, nothing's jumping out at me. head gasket off of here. Head gasket does not look great, but it's not as bad as I've seen. I've seen them blow between cylinders, between water jackets and the combustion chamber. I don't see anything terrible yet. It's hard to tell when these heads are cracked, when they're dirty. So we're going to run this through the parts washer tomorrow at some point. Most of the time these heads have cracks in them if they've been hot. With the water pump off of it for so long, this could have been an overheated engine. The other thing that's odd is that you can see right here on this cylinder, the edge of the head, the combustion chamber is clean. That's cylinder 3. The rest of them look about the same. The bores look pretty nice so far. I've yet to turn this over. The cross-hatching is beautiful. That cylinder is wet and a little bit cleaner than the rest of them, so that's kind of suspicious. Let's turn this thing over here. The rest of this engine looks really nice. Oh, now I've done messed up. Oh, some BMW blue. A lot of BMW blue. Now let's start pulling the pan. Wow, it's pretty sludgy. Well, I don't see anything in the pickup. It's a good sign. This is pretty dark and dingy. I haven't opened up one that was this dirty in a while. Just check out the pan. Look at the amount of sludge in that pan. It's pretty bad for one of these engines, I'm not going to lie. This engine was not well taken care of. Let's get this oil pump gear off. Put that back on there. Now we're going to pull the pump with the pickup. Here's the pump. It's super slimy. Next, the windage tray. We're actually going to flip this thing back over. There's some oil inside the pistons that I don't want to end up on the floor. I'm just going to kind of pour this back into here. Oh my God, it's so thick. Not going to say it. And it smells. All right, we're going to pull the rods and pistons out. Bearing looks nice. Rings look pretty good. Piston skirts look good. Nothing telling yet. Let's do number 6. Bearing also looks good. one looks all right too. That bearing is nice. Looks pretty good. There we go. Yep, everything looks all right. So far, so good. Well, that came out a little too easy. That just almost fell out of the bore. This is that really clean piston too. All right, last and least. Well, I gave these rods and pistons a bath. They all looked really good. But one thing jumped out, and that is how clean this piston is compared to the rest. Now, I sprayed them all with the same amount of brake clean, and look how clean this is. And if you remember right, when I pulled the cylinder head, one combustion chamber looked slightly less sturdy than the rest. So I gave this head a quick brake clean bath. And as you can see, I think you can hone in on the cylinder that might have a problem. Just maybe. No, I think it's this one. And if you look real close, there's proof that even a little crack can cause a lot of problems. It's a crack right there. This thing was overheated. I mean, it made sense. It came in without a water pump. I don't know if they gave up after they diagnosed this. I'm not sure. But it's a good thing I pulled this engine apart. At this point, I think I'm done. I don't see the value in pulling the crank. We didn't see any signs of bearing wear or anything on the rod bearings, so I might even put the rods and pistons back into this and sell it as a short block. In fact, I saved every single fastener that came off of this engine. I got a little bin for those. I could put the whole engine back together, but I think I'm just going to do the short block, and then we'll sell the cams and all the other outside parts separate. I think that's what we're going to do. I'm going to consider this a pretty big win. Most of these parts are in really good condition, and they will sell for really good money. Plus, I've got a throttle body I'm taking home. I don't want to say that too loud. Cracking cylinder heads is something these engines are notorious for. If you get them hot, any of the 91 and later dual overhead cam inline sixes, if you get them hot, you risk cracking the cylinder head. And I've seen them crack in 7 or 8 spots on one head. This was only cracked in one spot, but it doesn't matter. Crack is crack. That head is bad. I know it can probably be repaired, but it's not worth it. These heads are not that expensive. You might as well get one that's never been hot, never been cracked, never been repaired. Send that to a machine shop and fix it, which is why I don't understand why someone didn't just do that. I understand not being able to afford a repair, and I also understand parking your car for a period of time when you have plans on fixing it later, but parking it in the weeds and letting it rust and rot away, it doesn't make your car any nicer. Mother Nature does not fix cars, people do. So either get it to someone that can fix it, or store it correctly, or sell it. Setting it in the weeds to let it rot is only going to hurt your pocketbook more. I hope you enjoyed this teardown, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm at 100,000 subs. I don't know how I did this, and so thank you guys. Thank you. If you'd like to buy parts off of this engine, I'm going to leave her email in the video description. And as always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.